He yanked the HDMI cable right out of the laptop. The screen went black. The room fell silent. My presentation, the one I'd spent 3 months building, ended mid-sentence. "That's enough," he said, smirking. "Let someone competent talk." 30 executives sat frozen, unsure if this was part of the act. It wasn't. But what he didn't know was that I'd already won. And in the next hour, his entire career would collapse in front of everyone. If you've ever been disrespected by someone who stole your work, this story is for you. Hit that like button if you believe in justice served cold, and subscribe, because what happens next is the kind of revenge most people only dream about. Now, let me take you back to where this nightmare began. The first time I met Paul, I thought he was one of the smartest people I'd ever worked with. It was my second week at the company, and I was still trying to figure out where the break room was when he walked into my cubicle with a coffee in each hand. He handed me one, black, no sugar, and said, "Heard you went to Stanford. We're gonna do great things together." There was something about the way he said it, this easy confidence, like success was already guaranteed and we were just along for the ride. He had that corporate charm, the kind that made you feel like you were part of something bigger. Loud voice, firm handshake, always dressed just a little sharper than everyone else. He became my manager 2 weeks later, and I remember feeling lucky. Lucky to have someone who seemed to actually care, who saw potential in me when I was just another new hire trying not to screw up. Paul called us a team. He used that word a lot. "We're a team," he'd say during our one-on-ones. "You're the brain, I'm the voice. Together, we're unstoppable." I like that. It made sense. I was good with data, with analysis, with seeing patterns that others missed. He was good with people, with presenting, with making complex ideas sound simple and exciting. It felt like a real partnership, the kind you read about in business books. I'd work late into the night building models and reports, and he'd take them into the boardroom and make them shine. And for the first year, it worked exactly like that. Every time he presented something I'd built, he'd make sure to mention my name. "Couldn't have done this without my guy here," he'd say, gesturing toward me in meetings. "He's the engine behind this whole thing." I felt seen. I felt valued. I felt like I was finally building a career that mattered. But by the second year, something started to shift. It was subtle at first, so subtle I convinced myself I was imagining it. The mentions of my name became less frequent. I'd send Paul a detailed analysis on customer behavior trends, something I'd spent 2 weeks building, and he'd forward it to the VP with just a single line. "Thoughts below." No mention of who actually did the work, no credit, just his name in the from field. I told myself it didn't matter. That's how corporate life works, right? Managers present the work, that's the hierarchy, that's the system. But then the shared drive got locked. "Just for efficiency," Paul explained when I asked him about it one afternoon. "Too many people editing the same files at once. I'll handle version control from now on." I nodded and said that made sense, but something in my gut twisted. A week later, I saw one of my reports, a deep dive into our competitors' pricing strategy, rewritten in Paul's style and sent directly to the CEO. Same data, same conclusions, but stripped of my voice and wrapped in his. I stared at that email for a long time, reading it over and over, trying to figure out how I felt. Angry? Betrayed? No, not yet. Confused mostly, like the rules of the game had changed and nobody had told me. I didn't confront him. I didn't send a passive-aggressive email or ask for a meeting to clear the air, because when you confront a thief, you warn him. You give him time to cover his tracks, to prepare his defense, to spin the story before you can. And I didn't want that. I wanted to watch. I wanted to see how far he would go. So I started keeping my own records. Every report I created, I saved a copy in a personal folder, encrypted and stored offline. Every email I sent him, I forwarded to my personal account. Every meeting where I contributed an idea, I wrote down the date, the time, and who was in the room. I didn't know what I was going to do with all of it yet. I just knew I needed proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that this work was mine. The breaking point came at a board dinner 6 months later. It was one of those stuffy corporate events held in a private room at an overpriced restaurant where the chicken was dry and everyone pretended to enjoy themselves. I was sitting 3 seats down from Paul, nursing a glass of wine I didn't really want, when the CFO stood up and raised his glass. "I'd like to make a toast," he said, smiling in Paul's direction, "to leadership, specifically to Paul's outstanding work on the Phoenix project. It's been a game changer for this company, and we're lucky to have someone with his vision on our team." Everyone clapped. People smiled and nodded. Paul stood up, raised his glass, and gave this humble little speech about teamwork and dedication. "Couldn't have done it without my team," he said, looking right at me as he said it. Not to me, at me. Like I was a prop, a piece of set decoration in his personal highlight reel. That's when it hit me, really hit me. This wasn't a partnership. This wasn't a mentorship. This was theft, plain and simple. And I'd been letting it happen because I didn't want to believe someone could be that calculating, that shameless. The Phoenix project was mine, every single piece of it. I'd spent 4 months on it. 4 months of staying late, of skipping dinners with friends, of canceled weekend plans. I'd built every financial model, every risk assessment, every growth projection. Paul's contribution had been to sit in on a few meetings, nod along, and then present my work to the board like he'd pulled it out of his own brain. And now he was being toasted for it. Now he was the hero. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction, every meeting, every moment I'd handed him my work and watched him walk away with it. I thought about all the times I'd told myself it was fine, that this was just how things worked, that my time would come. But my time wasn't coming. It was being stolen, month after month, project after project, and if I didn't do something, it would keep happening until there was nothing left of me but a name in the company directory. The next morning, I started building a new folder. This one was different. This one wasn't just a backup, it was a weapon. I went through every project I'd worked on in the past 3 years and pulled the metadata. Creation dates, edit histories, version logs. I pulled email threads showing me sending Paul the first drafts and him replying with nothing more than, "Looks good," or "I'll take it from here." I pulled meeting notes where my handwriting filled the margins with ideas and strategies that later showed up in Paul's presentations word for word. I organized it all by project, by date, by type of contribution. And then I added one more thing, an internal audit file I'd been keeping for myself, a detailed log of every time Paul had taken credit for my work, every meeting I'd been excluded from, every email he'd sent on my behalf without asking. It was meticulous. It was damning, and it was going to be my safety net. 2 months later, performance review season rolled around. I sat across from Paul in his office, the same office where he used to tell me I was indispensable, and he gave me the kind of smile you give someone when you're holding all the cards. "You're doing fine," he said, leaning back in his chair like we were just having a casual chat. "But leadership doesn't think you're quite ready for the next level yet." The next level. The promotion he'd been dangling in front of me for 3 years. The one he told me was practically mine after the Phoenix project. The one I'd earned 10 times over. I nodded slowly, keeping my face neutral, and said, "Noted." Inside, something clicked. Not anger, not rage. Clarity. Cold, sharp clarity. If the system was rigged, I wasn't going to keep playing by its rules. I was going to build my own game. That night, I opened my email and scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't thought about in months. Marcus Chen. We'd gone to grad school together, stayed in touch for a few years after, and then drifted the way people do when life gets busy. He was director of strategy now at one of our biggest competitors, and 6 months ago, he'd sent me a message out of the blue. "Ever think about moving? We could use someone like you." I read it, thought about it maybe 10 seconds, and then archived it. But now, I pulled it back up, stared at it, and hit reply. "Let's talk," I wrote. That was it. 2 words. But those 2 words changed everything. Over the next 6 weeks, I lived 2 lives. By day, I was Paul's loyal subordinate. I smiled in meetings, I sent him reports, I nodded along when he took credit for things I'd built. By night, I was someone else. I was on video calls with Marcus and his executive team, walking them through my work,
my real work, the work that had my name on it in the metadata. We've been watching you, or I guess we've been watching Paul, but we know where the real work is coming from. I didn't try to deny it. I didn't pretend it was a team effort. I just said, the credit hasn't exactly been distributed fairly. Marcus laughed. We figured. That's why we want you, not him. They asked for examples of my leadership, my strategic thinking, my ability to execute. I sent them everything. Every project Paul had taken credit for, with full documentation. Meeting notes with my name on the brainstorming sessions, email threads showing I'd sent the first drafts, server logs showing the files were created under my account. It was airtight. It was undeniable. And 2 days later, Marcus called me back. He said, "This is incredible. And honestly, it's kind of infuriating. You've been getting robbed." I didn't disagree. So here's what we're thinking. We want you, Senior Director of Strategy. You'd be leading a team of 8, working directly with the C-suite, and we're prepared to make you an offer that reflects what you're actually worth, not what Paul's been letting you settle for. I felt my heart start to race. I said, "What kind of offer?" He told me the number. $600,000. Base salary. Not including bonuses, not including stock options, just base. I almost dropped the phone. But I didn't accept right away, because leaving wasn't enough. I didn't just want to quit and move on. I wanted Paul to understand what he'd done. I wanted him to feel it publicly and completely, the same way he'd made me feel small and invisible for 3 years. So when Marcus sent the formal offer letter, I wrote back and said, "I'm interested, very interested, but I need to finish one last thing here first. There's a quarterly board meeting in 3 weeks. After that, I'm yours." Marcus paused, then replied, "I like the way you think. Let me know when you're ready." And just like that, the plan was set. Paul, predictably, insisted that we co-present at the quarterly board meeting. He said it'll be good exposure for you, like he was doing me some kind of favor. I knew exactly what he meant. He'd let me do the setup, the boring data slides, just long enough to warm up the room. Then he'd step in, take over, and deliver the big finish. It was his routine, his power move, and I'd watched him do it a dozen times before. But this time was going to be different. This time I wasn't going to step aside quietly. This time I was going to let him hang himself with his own arrogance. The week before the meeting, I prepared 2 presentations. The first was the one Paul expected. Clean, polished, professional. Quarterly performance metrics, revenue forecasts, client acquisition data. Standard stuff. The second presentation, the one Paul didn't know existed, was something entirely different. I called it Phoenix Project, Intellectual Property and Authorship Documentation. It had the company's legal watermark on every page. It had metadata trails showing creation dates and author names. It had email evidence, meeting notes, and version histories, all of it timestamped, all of it pointing back to me. I saved it in a hidden folder on my laptop, password protected, and waited. The morning of the board meeting, I woke up at 5 in the morning. I didn't feel nervous. I didn't feel scared. I felt calm, focused. I made coffee, went for a run, ironed my best shirt, and checked my phone. There was a text from Paul. "Ready to crush it today?" I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Absolutely." By 9, I was in the boardroom. 30 executives, the CEO at the head of the table, the VPs and directors filling the rest of the room. Paul walked in 10 minutes late, as usual, carrying his coffee like it was a prop in a one-man show. He winked at me and whispered, "Let's give them a show." I smiled back and said, "Oh, we will."
I started the presentation exactly the way we'd planned. I walked them through the opening slides, talking about quarterly performance metrics, client retention rates, and revenue growth projections. My voice was steady, confident, the kind of tone that makes people lean forward and pay attention. I could see a few of the executives nodding along, a couple of them taking notes. Paul stood off to the side with his arms crossed, nodding like a proud coach watching his star player. He had no idea what was coming. None of them did. I got through the 3rd slide, then the 4th, laying out the data cleanly and efficiently. I was halfway through explaining the customer acquisition funnel when I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. I ignored it. 5th slide. 6th. The room was engaged now. The CFO asked a clarifying question about one of the metrics, and I answered it smoothly, clearly. Paul smiled. He thought everything was going according to plan. He thought I was setting the stage for him to swoop in and be the hero, and that's exactly when he made his move. Without warning, without saying a word, Paul stepped forward and reached past me. He grabbed the HDMI cable plugged into my laptop and yanked it straight out. The screen went black. The projector hummed but displayed nothing. The room fell into this thick, stunned silence. I stood there, frozen mid-sentence, staring at the blank screen. For a second, nobody moved. A few of the executives looked at each other, confused, like maybe this was some kind of planned transition, some dramatic setup for the next part of the presentation. It wasn't. Paul straightened his tie, turned to face the room and said, "That's enough. Let someone competent talk." His voice was casual, almost playful, like he just made a lighthearted joke. But his eyes were cold. He looked at me the way you'd look at an intern who'd overstayed their welcome. A couple of people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Someone coughed. The CEO's expression didn't change, but I saw his eyes narrow just slightly. And Paul, completely unbothered, stepped into the center of the room and started talking. He didn't miss a beat. He launched into the presentation like he'd been the one building it for months, like every graph and every data point had come from his own brain. He talked about customer segmentation strategies, about the behavioral trends I'd identified, about the revenue model I'd spent weeks refining. He paced back and forth at the front of the room, gesturing confidently, making eye contact with the executives, pausing at all the right moments for effect. And the worst part? He was good. He'd always been good at this. He knew how to work a room, how to make complicated ideas sound simple and exciting, how to make people believe he was a genius. I stood off to the side, hands in my pockets, watching him perform my work like it was a Broadway show. My heart was pounding, but I kept my face blank, neutral, calm. Inside, I was burning. Every word that came out of his mouth felt like a knife. Every nod from the executives felt like a betrayal. But I didn't interrupt. I didn't argue. I didn't make a scene. Because this was exactly what I'd been waiting for. This was the moment I needed him to have. The moment where his arrogance was on full display, where he couldn't resist taking everything for himself, where he showed everyone in that room exactly who he really was. Halfway through his monologue, my phone buzzed again. I pulled it out slowly, casually, like I was just checking the time. But what I saw on the screen made my pulse spike. New email, subject line, offer letter confirmed, final approval. I opened it. It was from the HR director at Marcus's firm. Board approved your offer this morning, Senior Director of Strategy, $600,000 base salary, start date flexible. Can you begin Monday? I read it twice, just to make sure it was real. Then I looked up at Paul, still talking, still stealing, still completely convinced he'd won. And I smiled. Not a big smile, just a small, quiet one. Because the timing couldn't have been more perfect. He'd just humiliated me in front of 30 executives, yanked the cable on my presentation, called me incompetent in front of the most important people in the company. And at the exact same moment, I'd just been handed a job offer worth more than twice what I was making here at a company that actually valued my work. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and whispered under my breath, "You just made this so much better." Paul kept talking for another 10 minutes. 10 long, excruciating minutes where he explained every detail of the strategy I'd built using the exact phrasing I'd written in my notes, hitting every talking point I'd prepared. He talked about the 4-pillar client retention model. He talked about the competitive landscape analysis. He talked about the 3-year growth forecast and the risk mitigation strategies. All of it mine. Every single word. A few of the executives were nodding along. One of them looked impressed. The CFO scribbled something in his notebook. Paul was winning, at least in his mind. He thought he'd just pulled off the performance of his career. He had no idea he was about to lose everything. Finally, he clicked to the last slide, my last slide, the one with the clean summary and the bold call to action, and turned back to the room with this big, confident smile. So, that's where we are. Strong quarter, stronger pipeline, and a strategy that's going to carry us into next year and beyond. Any questions? The room was quiet for a moment. Then the CEO leaned forward slightly, resting his hands on the table. "Impressive work, Paul," he said.
Paul's smile got even wider. Thank you, sir. It's been a team effort, of course, but I'm really proud of what we've accomplished. Team effort. The words felt like acid in my throat. The CEO's eyes shifted to me, still standing off to the side, still silent. And you? He asked. Anything you'd like to add? Paul turned to look at me too, that same smug grin on his face, that same condescending tone in his voice. Yeah, he said. Anything to add? I stepped forward, slowly, calmly. I didn't say anything at first. I just walked over to where my laptop was sitting, picked up the HDMI cable from the floor where Paul had dropped it, and held it in my hand for a moment. The room was completely silent. Everyone was watching me. I could feel the weight of their attention, the confusion, the curiosity. And then, without a word, I plugged the cable back into my laptop. The screen flickered, the projector came back to life, and a new slide appeared on the wall behind me. The title was simple, clean, and impossible to ignore. Phoenix Project, Intellectual Property and Authorship Documentation. The room went dead quiet. I saw Paul's smile falter, just a little, just for a second, but I saw it. I clicked again.
I clicked to the next slide. The second slide was a table. Rows and rows of files, each one with a file name, a creation date, a last modified date, and an author name. Every single line said the same thing. Created by my name. Last modified by my name. Collaboration, none. I let the slide sit there. I didn't say anything. I just let them read it. I watched the executives lean forward, squinting at the screen, processing what they were seeing. I saw the CFO's eyebrows go up. I saw one of the VPs glance at Paul, then back at the screen. Paul's face had gone pale. His mouth opened like he was about to say something, but nothing came out. I clicked again.
The third slide was email evidence, screenshots of messages I'd sent Paul over the past 2 years. Here's the first draft of the Phoenix analysis. Let me know your thoughts. Attached is the client retention model we discussed, ready for your review. Updated the risk assessment based on our meeting notes, and Paul's responses, short and dismissive. Looks good. I'll take it from here. Thanks. No collaboration, no input, just him taking my work and walking away with it. Another click. The fourth slide was meeting notes, actual scanned images of the notebooks I'd kept during strategy sessions, my handwriting filling the margins, my diagrams, my ideas, the same ideas that had shown up word for word in Paul's presentations to the board. I heard someone in the room let out a quiet breath, like they were just starting to understand what they were looking at. I clicked again. The fifth slide was the big one, a full forensic breakdown of the Phoenix Project. Every model, every graph, every projection, every conclusion. And next to each one, a timestamp showing when it was created, who created it, and what edits, if any, had been made by anyone else. It was all me, every single piece. Paul hadn't contributed a single original idea. He hadn't built a single model. He hadn't written a single line of analysis. He'd just taken what I gave him, put his name on it, and presented it like it was his. The evidence was right there on the screen, undeniable and damning, and there was nothing he could say to explain it away. The room started to shift. I could feel it. The executives weren't looking at me anymore. They were looking at Paul. The CEO's expression had gone from curious to cold. The CFO was floundering, flipping back through his notes like he was trying to reconcile what he'd just heard with what he was seeing now. One of the VPs leaned over and whispered something to the person next to her. The energy in the room had completely changed. It wasn't confusion anymore. It was anger. It was betrayal. And Paul, standing there in the middle of it all, looked like he was about to be sick. His face had gone from pale to red, sweat starting to bead on his forehead. His hands were shaking. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "This is," he started, his voice cracking, "this is taken out of context." I stayed calm. I kept my voice quiet, measured, almost gentle. "Is it?" I asked. I clicked to the next slide. This one showed access logs from the shared drive, the same drive Paul had locked me out of months ago. It showed every time he'd edited a document,
every time he'd restricted my permissions, every time he'd marked himself as the sole contributor on a file I'd created. He'd been systematically erasing my contributions one file at a time for over a year. The logs didn't lie, the timestamps didn't lie, the metadata didn't lie. "Paul," the CEO said, his voice low and ice cold. "Care to explain this?" Paul tried. He really did. He stammered something about collaboration, about team efforts, about how we'd worked on everything together, and maybe the files didn't reflect the full picture. But the more he talked, the worse it got. His words were tripping over each other. He was sweating through his shirt. His voice kept cracking. He looked desperate, cornered, and everyone in that room could see it. I clicked to the next slide. This one was a side-by-side comparison. On the left, Paul's self-evaluation from his last performance review, where he'd claimed full credit for the Phoenix project, the client retention model, and the revenue forecasting framework. On the right, the actual file creation records showing that I'd built every single one of those things, and Paul had never touched them. The contradiction was impossible to ignore. He'd lied. Not just to me, to everyone. To the CEO, to the board, to the entire company. And now they all knew it. The CEO stood up. The sound of his chair scraping against the floor was the loudest thing in the room. "Paul, step outside." Paul didn't move. He just stood there, frozen, staring at the screen like he couldn't believe what was happening. "Now," the CEO said, and this time it wasn't a request. Paul's legs finally started working. He turned toward the door, his steps unsteady, his shoulders hunched like he was trying to make himself smaller. As he walked past me, he looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in years. And for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not anger, not arrogance, just pure, unfiltered fear. He knew what was coming. He knew his career was over, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. He reached the door, hesitated for just a second, and then walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and the room stayed silent. Nobody spoke, nobody moved. The projector was still humming, my slides still on the screen, the evidence still staring back at them. And then, slowly, the CEO turned to look at me. His expression was unreadable. "Why didn't you bring this up sooner?" he asked. It was a fair question. I took a breath, choosing my words carefully, because I wanted to be sure. I wanted the evidence to be airtight, and I wanted it to matter. He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "It matters."
The CEO asked me to stay after Paul left. Actually, it wasn't really a request. "Give us a few minutes," he said to the room. And one by one, the executives filed out, some of them looking back at me with expressions I couldn't quite read. Curiosity, maybe? Respect? Possibly anger that I hadn't said something sooner? The CFO was the last to leave, and as he passed me, he put a hand on my shoulder and said quietly, "That took guts." Then it was just me and the CEO, alone in that big boardroom with my presentation still glowing on the screen behind us. He sat down, gestured for me to sit across from him, and for a long moment, he didn't say anything. He just looked at me, his fingers steepled under his chin, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "How long has this been going on?" he asked. I didn't have to think about it. 3 years, I said. The first year, he gave me credit. The second year, it started disappearing. By the third year, my name wasn't mentioned at all. He nodded slowly, like he was processing that. "And you documented everything?" It wasn't a question. "I did," I said. "Why?" he asked. "Why not just come to HR? Why not come to me?" I thought about that for a second. It was a question I'd asked myself 100 times while I was building that folder, collecting that evidence, watching Paul take credit for my work over and over again. Because I didn't think anyone would believe me, I said honestly. Paul's charismatic. He's good at what he does. And what he does is make people believe him. If I'd come to you 6 months ago with a complaint, it would have been my word against his. And he's a manager. I'm just an analyst. Who do you think people would have believed? The CEO's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He knew I was right. "So you waited," he said. "I waited," I confirmed.
I waited until I had evidence that couldn't be disputed, evidence that didn't require anyone to take my word for anything. The files speak for themselves. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. "They do," he said. Then he looked at me with something that might have been respect, or maybe just exhaustion. "What do you want?" he asked. "Do you want his job? Do you want a promotion? A raise? What would make this right?" It was a fair question, and a month ago, I might have had a different answer. A month ago, I might have said I wanted the recognition I deserved, the title I'd earned, the respect I should have had all along. But sitting there in that boardroom, watching the man who'd stolen 3 years of my life get escorted out in disgrace, I realized something. I didn't want anything from this company anymore. This place had let Paul get away with what he did for 3 years. Nobody had noticed. Nobody had questioned it. Nobody had thought to check whether the work he was presenting was actually his. And that told me everything I needed to know about how much they actually valued people like me. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully, "but I don't think there's anything you can offer me that would make me want to stay." His eyebrows went up slightly. "You're leaving," he said. It wasn't a question. "I am," I said. "I've already accepted another position." For the first time since this whole thing started, I saw something like surprise cross his face. "Where?" he asked. I smiled, just a little. "A competitor," I said. "They made me an offer I couldn't resist." He sat with that for a moment, then nodded. "I can't say I blame you," he said quietly. "For what it's worth, you deserved better than this. Better than him." I stood up, started packing my laptop into my bag. "I know," I said. And I meant it. For the first time in 3 years, I actually believed it. "We'll need you to stay through a transition period. 2 weeks, maybe 3, just to make sure." I cut him off, gently but firmly. "With all due respect, sir, no. I'll send over documentation for everything I've been working on. I'll make sure nothing falls through the cracks, but I'm not staying in this building any longer than I have to." He looked like he wanted to argue, but something in my expression must have told him it wasn't worth it. He nodded. "I understand," he said. Then, quieter, almost like he was talking to himself. "We really screwed this up, didn't we?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. We both already knew. I walked out of that boardroom with my head high, my laptop bag over my shoulder, and my phone already buzzing with messages. Text from Marcus. "I'm hearing rumors. Did something happen?" I smiled and typed back, "I'll fill you in later. Monday start date still good?" His response came back in seconds. "More than good. Welcome to the team." I sent one more message, this one to the HR director at my new company. "I accept the offer. $600,000 base, senior director of strategy, start date Monday. Thank you for believing in my work." Her response was almost immediate. "We're lucky to have you. See you Monday morning." I walked past my cubicle without stopping. I didn't need anything from it. Everything that mattered was already backed up, already saved, already mine. As I headed toward the elevator, I saw people staring. Word had already started to spread. I heard whispers, saw people leaning over cubicle walls to talk in low voices. By the end of the day, everyone in the building would know what happened, and I was fine with that. The elevator doors opened and I stepped inside. As they started to close, I caught a glimpse of Paul through the glass walls of a conference room. He was sitting alone, his head in his hands, his jacket off and his tie loosened. He looked small, broken. For just a second, I felt something that might have been pity. But then I remembered the board dinner. I remembered him toasting himself for my work. I remembered every meeting I was excluded from, every email he sent without my name on it, every time he looked at me like I was disposable. And the pity disappeared. This wasn't cruelty. This was consequences. The doors closed and I rode down to the lobby in silence. When I walked out of that building into the afternoon sunlight, I felt lighter than I had in years.
I didn't go straight home. I went to a coffee shop 3 blocks away, ordered a nice coffee, and sat by the window watching people walk by. My phone kept buzzing. Messages from coworkers, some supportive, some just nosy, all of them wanting to know what had happened. I ignored most of them. Then I got a message from someone I didn't expect. It was from Jennifer, one of the other analysts on Paul's team.
We'd worked together on a few projects, but had never been particularly close. Her message was short. I'm so glad you did that. He did the same thing to me 2 years ago. I just didn't have the guts to call him out. Thank you. I stared at that message for a long time. 2 years ago. That meant Paul had been doing this long before I even started. He wasn't his first victim. He probably wasn't his last. And that made what I'd done feel even more necessary. I wasn't just standing up for myself. I was standing up for everyone he'd ever stolen from, everyone he'd ever made feel small and worthless and invisible. I typed back, "You had the guts. You just didn't have the right moment. I'm sorry he did that to you." She sent back a heart emoji, and then, "Good luck at your new job. You're going to kill it." That made me smile. I finished my coffee, walked the 10 blocks home, and when I got to my apartment, I just stood in the doorway for a minute, taking it all in. This place had been my refuge for 3 years. The place I came back to after long days of watching Paul take credit for my work, the place where I had stayed up late building presentations I knew he'd steal. But it didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like the start of something new. I sat down at my kitchen table, opened my laptop, and started writing an email. Not to Paul, not to the CEO, to myself. A list of everything I wanted to accomplish in my new role, the projects I wanted to lead, the team I wanted to build, the reputation I wanted to earn, on my own terms, with my own name attached. I wrote for 2 hours, and by the time I was done, I had a plan. A real one, not a revenge plan, a success plan. Over the next 3 days, I wrapped up everything I needed to at the old company. I wrote detailed handoff documents for every project I'd been working on. I organized all my files, clearly labeled with instructions on where to find everything. I wasn't doing it for Paul, obviously. He was already gone. I was doing it for the people who'd have to pick up the pieces, the other analysts and junior managers who didn't deserve to be left in the dark just because their boss had been a fraud. On my last day, I didn't make a big deal out of it. I didn't send a goodbye email to the whole company or organize some awkward happy hour. I just quietly finished my work, sent my final documentation to the CEO's assistant, and walked out. But as I was leaving, the CFO caught me in the hallway. "Got a minute?" he asked. I nodded and followed him into his office. He closed the door and gestured for me to sit, but I stayed standing. "I wanted to apologize," he said, "for not seeing what was happening, for not questioning things sooner. You should never have had to deal with that." I appreciated the sentiment, but it didn't change anything. "I accept your apology, but respectfully, the system that let Paul get away with that for 3 years is still in place. I'm not the first person he did this to, and unless something changes, I won't be the last." He looked uncomfortable, but he nodded. "You're right," he said. "We're implementing new policies, better documentation requirements, more transparency in project attribution, regular audits. It's not enough, but it's a start." I nodded. "That's good," I said, and I meant it. Not for me, I was already gone, but for the next person, for the next analyst who worked their ass off and deserved to have their name attached to their work. "Good luck," he said as I turned to leave. "You too." And then I walked out of that office, out of that building, and into the rest of my life. That weekend, I didn't think about Paul once. I didn't think about the presentation or the boardroom or the look on his face when the truth came out. I just focused on getting ready for Monday. I bought new clothes, got a haircut, organized my home office. I felt like an athlete preparing for the biggest game of their career. And in a way I was. This was my chance to prove that I could succeed on my own terms, without someone standing over me taking credit for everything I built. Sunday night, I got one last message. It was from Paul. I almost deleted it without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. It was short, just 3 words. "You destroyed me." I stared at those words for a long time, trying to figure out how I felt about them. Guilty? No. Satisfied? Not exactly. Mostly, I just felt tired. Tired of carrying the weight of his betrayal, tired of anger, tired of bitterness. So I typed back, slowly and carefully, "No, you destroyed yourself. I just stopped letting you destroy me too. Then I blocked his number, deleted the thread, and went to bed. And for the first time in 3 years, I slept through the whole night without waking up once.
Monday morning came faster than I expected. I woke up at 6, made coffee, and stood in front of my closet for a solid 10 minutes trying to decide what to wear. It felt important somehow, this first impression at a place where nobody knew me as Paul's assistant, where nobody had ever seen me stand quietly in the background while someone else took credit for my ideas. I picked a navy suit, light blue shirt, no tie. Professional, but not trying too hard. Confident, but approachable. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the person staring back. Not because I looked different, but because I felt different. Lighter. Freer. Like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't even know was there until it was finally gone. The new office was downtown, 30 floors up in a glass tower with the view of the whole city. When I walked into the lobby, the receptionist smiled and said, "You must be the new senior director. Welcome. Marcus is waiting for you on 28." I rode the elevator up, watching the city get smaller below me, and when the doors opened, Marcus was standing there with 2 cups of coffee and the biggest grin I'd ever seen. "There he is," he said, handing me one of the cups. "The man who just became a legend." I laughed. "I don't know about that," I said. "Oh, I do," Marcus replied. "Word travels fast in our industry. Half the strategy directors in the city have heard about what you did. Paul's name is mud and yours is gold. You couldn't have asked for a better entrance." He walked me through the office, introducing me to people whose names I tried desperately to remember, showing me conference rooms and collaboration spaces and the cafeteria with actually good coffee. And then he brought me to my office. Not a cubicle, not a shared workspace, an actual office with a door and a window and a desk big enough to spread out on. "This is yours," Marcus said. "Your team's desks are right outside. They're excited to meet you." I set my bag down and just stood there for a moment, taking it in. This was real. This wasn't a fantasy or a backup plan. This was my actual life now. My first week was a blur of meetings and introductions and onboarding sessions. I met my team, 8 smart, hungry analysts and junior strategists who actually seemed excited to work with me. Not for me, with me. We had our first team meeting on Tuesday, and I told them straight up, "I'm not interested in taking credit for your work. If you build something, your name goes on it. If we collaborate, both our names go on it. I will never, ever let someone else's contributions disappear. That's a promise." I saw a couple of them exchange glances, like they weren't sure if I was serious or just saying what they wanted to hear. But I meant every word. I'd lived the alternative, and I would never let that happen to someone else. Not on my watch. By the end of the first month, we'd closed 2 major client deals, and I'd presented our strategy framework to the executive team 3 times. And every single time, I made sure to call out specific contributions by name. This retention model was built by Jessica. This pricing analysis came from David. This competitive landscape overview was a collaboration between myself and Kim. I watched their faces light up every time I said their names in front of the executives, and I remembered how that used to feel, back when Paul still gave me credit. I remembered how validating it was, how motivating, and I made a silent promise to myself that I would never stop doing that. Meanwhile, I started hearing things through the grapevine about what was happening at my old company. Paul had been terminated for cause within 48 hours of the board meeting. No severance, no letter of recommendation, just a box of his personal belongings and an escort to the parking lot. The company had quietly reached out to everyone who'd worked under him in the past 5 years, asking if they'd experienced similar issues with credit attribution. Turns out, I wasn't the only one. 3 other people came forward with similar stories. The company settled with all of them, and from what I heard, the settlements weren't small. Paul tried to find another job. I heard he'd applied to half a dozen firms in the first 2 months after he was fired. But our industry is small, and word travels fast. Nobody wanted to touch him. The guy who'd been so confident, so charismatic, so convinced of his own brilliance, couldn't get a call back. I didn't take pleasure in that exactly,
But I didn't feel bad about it either. He'd made his choices. These were the consequences. Around month 3 at my new job, I got an email from the CEO of my old company. The subject line just said, "Checking in." I almost deleted it, but something made me open it. The email was short. It said, "I wanted to reach out personally and let you know that we've implemented the policy changes we discussed. All project contributions are now logged and attributed in our internal systems. We've also created an anonymous reporting channel for employees who feel their work isn't being properly recognized. I know it doesn't change what happened to you, but I hope it means the next person won't have to go through what you did. You were right to leave, and I don't blame you. But for what it's worth, you're missed. If you ever want to come back, my door is open." I read it twice, then closed my laptop without responding. Maybe I'd respond eventually, maybe I wouldn't. But right now, I didn't owe them anything. Not my time, not my energy, not even a reply. 6 months into my new role, my team won the company's Strategy Excellence Award. It came with a bonus, a trophy, and a feature in the company newsletter. When they announced it at the all-hands meeting, Marcus made me come up to the front to accept it, and I brought my entire team with me. "This award doesn't belong to me," I said into the microphone, looking out at 200 faces. "It belongs to every person on this team who worked late, pushed through hard problems, and trusted me to lead them. Jessica, David, Kim, Aaron, Michelle, Tom, Sarah, and Chris, this is yours. Thank you for making me look good." The applause was loud, but what I remember most is the look on my team's faces. Pride. Real, genuine pride. And I thought about Paul, about how he used to stand in front of rooms like this and take all the credit, and how empty that must have made the people working for him feel. I never wanted to be that person. Not ever.
A year after I left my old company, I ran into Paul. It was completely by accident. I was grabbing lunch at a sandwich place near my office when I saw him sitting alone in the corner, staring at his phone. He looked different, older, tired. His suit didn't fit as well as it used to, and his hair was going gray at the temples. For a second, I thought about just leaving, pretending I hadn't seen him, but something made me walk over. "Paul," I said. He looked up, and for a moment he didn't seem to recognize me. Then his eyes widened. "Hey," he said quietly. There was none of the old confidence, none of the swagger. He just looked defeated. "How have you been?" I asked, and I genuinely wanted to know. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Honestly, not great. Can't find work. Industries basically blacklisted me. I'm doing some freelance consulting, but it's not the same." He paused, then looked at me with something that might have been regret. "I heard you're doing well, though. Senior director at Marcus's firm? That's great." "Really?" I nodded. "It is," I said. There was a long, awkward silence. Then Paul said, "I'm sorry for what I did. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I'm sorry." I looked at him for a long moment, trying to decide if I believed him. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't, but it didn't really matter anymore. "I appreciate that," I said. "I hope you figure things out." And I meant it. Not because I'd forgiven him exactly, but because holding on to anger was exhausting, and I didn't want to carry it anymore. I walked out of that sandwich shop, got back to my office, and didn't think about Paul again for months, because the truth was, he wasn't part of my story anymore. He was just a chapter I'd closed. My life now was about the team I was building, the strategies I was creating, the reputation I was earning with my own name on it. It was about proving every single day that I didn't need someone else's spotlight to shine. I had my own. 2 years after the board meeting, I got promoted to VP of Strategy. It came with a corner office, a significant raise, and a seat at the executive table. The day they announced it, Marcus pulled me aside and said, "You know what the best part of this is? You earned it. Every single bit of it. Nobody handed you this. Nobody took credit for your work. This is all you." And he was right. It was all me. The late nights, the hard problems, the risks I took, the team I built, the respect I earned, mine. That night, I went home and pulled out the folder I'd built all those years ago.
The one with all the evidence, all the timestamps, all the proof that the work was mine. I hadn't looked at it in over a year. I sat there staring at it for a long time, remembering how it felt to build it, how angry and desperate and determined I had been. And then I dragged it to the trash and emptied it. I didn't need it anymore. I didn't need proof of my worth. I knew my worth, and so did everyone else. People sometimes ask me if I regret how I handled things with Paul, if I think I went too far, if I should have just quit quietly and moved on without the public confrontation. And my answer is always the same. No, I don't regret it. Not for a second. Because what I did wasn't just about me. It was about every person who's ever had their work stolen, their contributions erased, their voice silenced by someone with more power and less integrity. It was about proving that you don't have to accept being invisible. You don't have to smile and nod while someone else takes credit for your brilliance. You can fight back. And if you do it smart, if you do it with evidence and patience and perfect timing, you can win. The best revenge isn't loud. It isn't violent. It isn't about making someone suffer. The best revenge is success. It's walking away from the people who underestimated you and building something so undeniable, so excellent, so unmistakably yours that they can't help but see what they lost. And that's exactly what I did. 3 years later, I'm still at the same company. I'm now Executive Vice President of Strategy and Innovation. I lead a department of 40 people. We've launched some of the most successful initiatives in the company's history, and my team has won more awards than I can count. But the thing I'm most proud of isn't the titles or the salary or the recognition. It's the culture I've built. A culture where people's contributions are acknowledged, where credit is given freely and honestly, where nobody has to spend their nights building secret folders of evidence just to prove their work is their own. I think about that board meeting sometimes. I think about the moment I plugged that cable back in and watched Paul's face go pale. I think about the silence in the room, the weight of the truth finally being spoken out loud. And I don't feel angry anymore. I don't feel bitter. I just feel free. Because I took back what was mine, and I never let anyone take it again. They say living well is the best revenge. I think they're right. But I'd add one thing. Living well, on your own terms, with your own name on your work, surrounded by people who respect you, that's not just revenge. That's victory. And every single day, I get to live it. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had someone take credit for your work or make you feel invisible, drop a comment and tell me about it. Have you ever stood up for yourself the way I did? Or are you still waiting for your moment? Hit that like button if you believe justice is real, even when it takes time. And subscribe, because stories like this, stories about people who refuse to stay silent, those are the stories worth telling. Thanks for listening, and remember, your work is yours. Your name matters, and you never have to let anyone make you invisible. Never.